Christian names. Having thus treated of the alterations the Irish have made in their surnames or family names for the purpose of making them appear English, I shall next proceed to point out the changes which they have likewise made in their Christian or baptism names for the same purpose. Many of their original names they have altogether rejected as not immediately reducible to any modern English forms, but others they have retained, though they have altered them in such a manner as to make them appear English. The writer could furnish from the authentic Irish annals and pedigree a long list of proper names of men which were in use in the reign of Queen Elizabeth, and which have been for a long time laid aside, but the limits of this journal would not afford room for such a list. He must, therefore, content himself by pointing out the original forms of such names as have been retained in an anglicized shape. These changes in the Christian names have been made not only by those families which have adopted the English surnames, but also by those who have retained the Milesianos and Macs. But these families have assumed that the English forms which they have given this class of names are perfectly correct. This was assumed to be true so early as the year 1689, in which we find Sir Richard Cox writing on the subject as follows, quote, "The Christian names of the Irish are, as in England, A, that is Hugh, Mahoon, that is Matthew, Tig, that is Timothy, Dermot, that is Jeremy, Crowther, that is Cornelius, Cormac, that is Charles, Art, that is Arthur, Donal, that is Daniel, Goron, that is Geoffrey, Marish, that is Moses," end quote. Now, I absolutely deny that these surnames are identical, though I acknowledge that they are at present universally received and used as such. In the first place, the name A, which has been metamorphosed into Hugh, is not synonymous with it, for the name A signifies fire, but Hugh, which has been borrowed from the Saxon, signifies high or lofty. Since then, they bear not the same meaning and are not made up of the same letters, in what, may it be asked, does their identity consist? It is quite obvious that they have nothing in common with each other. In the second place, Mahon, or as Sir Richard Cox writes, Mahoon, is not Matthew. For if we believe Spencer and some Irish glossographists, Mahon signifies a bear, and if they be correct, it cannot be identical, synonymous, or cognate with the scriptural name of Matthew, which does not signify a bear, but a gift or a present. In the third instance, the Irish name Tig, which according to the Irish glossaries signifies a poet, is not synonymous with Timothy, which means the God-fearing, and therefore is not identical or cognate with it. And I therefore doubt that the Irish people have any right to change Tig into Timothy. It was first anglicized to Thady, and the writer is acquainted with individuals who have rendered it Thaddeus, Theophilus, and Theodosius. In the fourth instance, Dermot, or as Sir Richard Cox writes it, Dermond, is not identical with Jeremy, nor is it synonymous or cognate with it. And this name, which was first very incorrectly anglicized Darby, the learned Dr. O'Brien writes as follows, quote, "Dermot, the proper name of several great princes of the old Irish. This name, which had its origin in pagan times, is a compound of dia, meaning God, and armage, the genitive plural of the Irish word arm, Latin arma, armo, rum, so that diarmage literally signifies the same as Deus armorum, the god of arms. Such is the exalted origin of this Irish name, which does not screen it from being at times a subject of ridicule to some of our pretty gentlemen of the modern English taste." End quote. It must, however, in candor, be acknowledged that this is not the meaning of the name Dermot, and that Dr. O'Brien invented this explanation to gain what he considered respectability for a name common in his own illustrious family, and which was considered vulgar by the fashionable people of the period at which he wrote. We have the authority of the Irish glossaries to show that Dermot, which was adopted at a remote period of Irish history as the proper name of a man, signifies a free man. And though this meaning does not sound as lofty as jus armorum of Dr. O'Brien, still it is sufficiently respectable to show that Dermot is not a barbarous name, and that the Irish people need not be ashamed of it. But they will be ashamed of every Irish name, in despite of all that can be said, as the writer has very strong grounds for asserting. The reason is obvious, because they have lost their nationality. In the fifth instance, Connor, as Sir Richard Cox writes, Quoher is not identical, synonymous, or even cognate with Cornelius, for though it has been customary with some families to Latinize it to Cornelius, still we know from the radices of both names that they bear not the slightest analogy to each other. For the Irish name is compounded of con, strength, and cower, aid or assistance, while the Latin Cornelius is differently compounded. It is then evident that there is no reason for changing the Irish Conover or Connor, Conacher to Cornelius, except a fancied resemblance between the sounds of both. But this resemblance is very remote indeed. In the sixth instance, the name of Cormac has nothing whatsoever to do with Charles, which means noble spirited, for it is explained by all the glossographers as signifying, quote, son of the chariot, end quote. And it is added, quote, that it was first given as a sobriquet in the 1st century to a Lagenian priest who happened to be born in a chariot while his mother was going on a journey, but that it was afterwards became honorable as the name of many great personages of Ireland, end quote. After the ascension of Charles I, however, to the throne, many Irish families of distinction changed Cormac to Charles in order to add dignity to the name by making it the same with that of the sovereign, a practice which has been very generally followed ever since. In the 7th instance, Sir Richard is probably correct. I do not deny that art may be synonymous with Arthur. Indeed, I am of the opinion that they are both words of the same original family of languages, for the Irish word art signifies noble. And if we can only rely on the British etymologists, Arthur bears much of a similar meaning in the Gomraeg or Old British. With respect to the 8th instance given by Sir Richard Cox, I have no hesitation in asserting that the Irish proper name Donal, which was originally anglicized Donald and Donald, is not the same with the scriptural name Daniel, which means God is judge. I am at least certain that the ancient Irish glossographers never viewed it as such, for they always wrote it Donal and understood it to mean a great and proud chieftain. This explanation may, however, be possibly incorrect, but the M in the first syllable shows that the name is formed from a root very different from that which the scriptural name Daniel is derived. With respect to the names of Goron, which is but a mistake for Chiron, Geoffrey, and Marish, Moses, the two last instances furnished by Sir Richard Cox, they were never born by the ancient Irish, but were borrowed from the Anglo-Normans and therefore have nothing to do with them in this place. What I have said is sufficient to show that the Christian names borne by the ancient Irish are not identical, synonymous, or even cognate with those substituted for them in the time of Sir Richard Cox. At the present day, very few of the original Irish names remain without being translated or assimilated with those borne by the English. Of this, I shall next furnish instances, the truth and correctness of which cannot be contradicted. Among the O'Connors of Connacht, the name Cathal, which is synonymous with the Welsh Cardell and signifies warlike, was changed to Charles after the ascension of Charles I to the throne. For the Irish, who were attached to this monarch, went great lengths to assimilate several of their Christian names to Charles. Thus, while among the O'Connors of Connacht, Cathal was manufactured into Charles, with which it will be readily granted it has nothing in common either in meaning or sound. Among the O'Connors of Fairley in Leinster, Cahir, which signifies warrior, was metamorphosed into the same, and at the same time, the McCarthys of Desmond substituted it for their Cormac, and the O'Hagans and other northern families for their Turlough. This was paying their court to the king with a vengeance. In the families of McCarthy, O'Sullivan, and O'Driscoll, Finian, a name very general among them, and which signifies the fair offspring, has been anglicized to Florence. Among the same southern families, the same Ser Vrahach, which prevails among the McCarthys in particular, and which signifies the noble judge, is translated Justin. In the family of O'Donovan, as the writer has had every opportunity of knowing, the name Morrow has been metamorphosed to Morgan, Dermot to Jeremiah, Tig to Timothy, Connor to Connacher, to Cornelius, Donna to Dennis, and Donald to Daniel. In the family of O'Brien, the hereditary name of Turlough has been changed to Terence, Mahon to Matthew, Murtha to Mortimer, and Lachna and Leishik to Lucius. Among the O'Grady's, the name Anneslis is rendered Stanislaus and Standish. In the families of O'Donnell, O'Kane, and others in the province of Ulster, Manus, a name borrowed by those families from the Danes, is now often rendered Manasses. In the families of MacMahon and McKenna in Ulster, the name Ardgal or Ardal, signifying high prowess or valor, is always anglicized Arnold. In the family of O'Madden, in the southeast of Galway, the hereditary name of Ancha, which is translated Animosis by Colgan, is now always rendered Ambrose, to which it will be readily granted it does not bear the slightest analogy. Among the families of Doyle, Kavanagh, and others in the province of Leinster, the name Muedo or Mogur, which they adopted from Saint Madoc or Aidan, the patron saint of the Diocese of Ferns, is now always rendered Moses among the Roman Catholics and Aidan among the Protestants. Anything to make a difference. Among the O'Neills in the province of Ulster, the name Phelim or Phelemi, explained as meaning the ever good, is named Felix. Con, signifying strength, is made Constantine, and Ferdora, meaning dark-visaged man, is rendered Ferdinand. Among the O'Connors of Connacht, the name Rory or Rory is anglicized Roderick, but among most other families, it is rendered Roger. In the same family, Tomaltach is rendered Thomas, Hugh, and Owen. In the families of MacDonald in Scotland and in the north of Ireland, the name Angus or Angus is always rendered Aeneas. Among the O'Hanleys of Sleepon in the east of the county of Roscommon, the name Barak, which they have adopted from their patron saint, is now always correctly rendered Bury. Throughout Ireland, the old name Brian is now rendered Bernard and vulgarized to Barney, which is more probably an abbreviation of Barnaby than of Bernard. Among the O'Haras and the O'Garas in the county have adopted from their great ancestor Cian, the son of Ulilullum, king of Munster, is now rendered Cian, and I observe that the chief O'Hara has suffered himself to be called Charles King O'Hara in a book lately dedicated to him. In the family name of Maguire, Cú Connacht is rendered Constantine, while in other families, Cosnavy undergoes precisely the same change. In the family of O'Kane, the name Cooey, written Cúmui, in the original language and signifying dog of the plain, is now rendered Quintin. In the name of O'Dowd, the ancient name of Dahi, which they have adopted from their great ancestor of that name, who was the last pagan king of Ireland, is now rendered David, a name which it is supposed to be synonymous. In the north and west of Ireland, the names Dovaltach, Dovdalehe, and Dovdara are all anglicised Dudley. In the family name of MacSweeney, the very ancient name of Heremon is anglicised Irwin, but it is now almost obsolete as a Christian name. In the families of O'Hanlon, O'Haran, and O'Heaney in the province of Ulster, the name Yoi, signifying horseman, and which was Latinized Jochodius, Achius, Eutychius, and Equitius, is anglicized Auhi and Ati, but this name is also almost obsolete. The writer in his travels through Ireland having never met more than one person who bore the name. Among the O'Mull Conrys, now Conrys, the names Flan, Fihill, and Flahry have been anglicised Florence. In the family of O'Daly, the name Boegialach, which was formerly Latinized Boethius, is now always rendered Bose. And in that of O'Clery, the name of Lewid is anglicised Louis or Lewis. Among the O'Reillys of Cavan, the hereditary name of Maelmora, which signifies majestic chief, is now invariably rendered Miles. And among the O'Kellys of Umene, the name Fachna is rendered Festus. In every part of Ireland, Melshachlin or Melaglin, which signifies servant of Saint Secundinus, has been changed to Malachi, to which it bears no analogy whatever, excepting some fancied resemblance in sound. In every part of Ireland, the name of Gilpatrick has been changed to Patrick. And by the way, it is curious to observe that common as the name Patrick has become now in Ireland, especially among the lower classes, it was never in use among the ancient Irish, for they never called their children by the name itself of the Irish apostle, deeming it more humble and more auspicious to call them his servants. And hence we find the ancient Irish calling their children not Patrick, but Malpatrick or Gilpatrick. And these names they Latinize Patricianus, not Patricius. The name Patrick is now looked upon as the most vulgar in use among the Irish, which is very strange and almost unaccountable prejudice, for Patricius was one of the most honourable names in all antiquity, as the reader will see if he will take the trouble to read the work on the antiquity of British churches by Usher, in which that learned primate gives the history and derivation of the name.